You made my day. I'm good for the rest of the day. All right, good morning. Had some stuff to take out, we'll get there. Stuff to take care of in the foyer. I always wanted to say that word, foyer. Okay, so we are going to be in Matthew. We're gonna look over a couple things that we talked about last week. Care of my beautiful wife, some things that she shared with me that I actually looked into, and I think bring a lot of color and a lot of depth to this story, and then we'll continue in chapter 21. Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew 21. Matthew 21. So we talked about this last week, but I wanted to share some thoughts with you because it's one of those things that we know about, but I don't know if we ever actually, dig in or know the levels to look at. So Matthew 21 is Jesus tells his disciples to go get this colt and this donkey, and it's ultimately going to take care of Zechariah chapter 9. And I encourage you at some point, if you have the interest, to actually read Zechariah chapter 9 and actually what's happening there, much like if you read other places where we find biblical prophecy, but actually understand what's happening in that specific text. So a couple things with this. It has been asked often, how can Jesus ride a donkey and a colt? Which he obviously can't, because we find here a donkey and a colt. Mark and Luke only include one. Matthew gives two. And then Matthew, of course, attributes this to Zechariah chapter 9, which is halfway through Zechariah chapter 9, this statement about what is going to happen. So one of the possibilities is that a donkey can hold more than a colt. And so he goes longer on the donkey than he does on the colt because it can hold more weight. And once he actually gets to Jerusalem and people begin to put branches out, then he swaps over. Another idea is that this is more of, what would the word be? Where we kind of overthink it and just go with it. Which one did he go on? Well, yes, he went on a donkey. And don't overthink the imagery. Don't overthink what is stated in Zechariah chapter 9. The other possibility is that, which I'm about to do, what I just told you not to do, which is overthink it, is the donkey is a representation of the Gentiles, and a colt is a representation of the Jews. So he rode both because he's going to be the Messiah over both. So riding into Jerusalem, he has both represented there. Yes. No, that's number 4. Seriously. Because if he hadn't been weaned, he needs the donkey there, and so Jesus doesn't ride on both. One is there to support, like a mother, to support the other. So there you go. I just did what I told you not to do. Don't overthink it, but sometimes you find these interesting things, and it is a good question. Which one did he ride on? Because Zechariah has both. He rode on a donkey and on a colt, and he can't do both at the same time. So those are some possibilities there. Yeah.
One of the things that I studied, and I didn't go deep into it or anything, but it was just that the terrain of the mount,
Yes.
that the donkey would have been able to hold him through the terrain of that, and then once he got into level ground, he could get on the colt and go into the city.
Right.
That's just one thing that they mentioned.
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
Exactly.
And
again,
separated a colt from its mom.
What's that?
Ever tried to separate a colt from its mom?
I can say I have not. I have not. I assume that. Recently, because I didn't grow up around this at all and never even thought to ask the question, why do sometimes bears charge you whenever you're in the area? And you know why? Because maybe you're near babies and you don't know it. And so they come after you. What's that? Horses would do the same. So yeah, it's very possible that was there and the donkey was there not to be ridden, but to support the colt. So all of these things that are way out of my wheelhouse, but that's what is some possibilities of what's going on there. These are questions you may never ask, but I ask them as I read through it and find it very interesting. The second thing is that when we look at Jesus as Messiah, as Savior, and so I wanted to share some thoughts with you on that, and then we can continue on in the chapter. When you look at the Old Testament in terms of Messiah or Christ, both of these have the idea, we think of them as anointed one, which they are. Messiah is Hebrew for anointed one, literally means anointed one, kind of like the word angelos, which was transliterated angel, but the idea there's a messenger, takes a message from one place to the other. And so both of these terms mean anointed one. But when you consider the idea of anointed, how does that happen? What are they anointed with? Oil. So they literally, a Messiah is someone that someone pours oil on them, and it's dripping down. It's dripping down their face, down their hair, on their beard if they have one. So it is a dripping one. And the word itself in the Hebrew actually has the idea of to smear. The word Messiah literally means to smear. So as you have the oil going down, it is a visible imagery of one being anointed for a purpose. And when you look at the idea of, you remember David got anointed by Samuel, which it's one of the things that just probably overly fascinates me, that he gets anointed to be king, and then he's not king for another 2+ decades, another 25 years, give or take. So the idea of being anointed or being consecrated is to be to smear, to have the oil smeared on you as a Messiah or as Christ. And so as Jesus is going to be, again, Jesus Christ is not his name. It's a description. He is Jesus the Christ, or Jesus the Messiah, the anointed one. And what is he anointed to do? It seems like an overthinking question. What is he anointed to do? To save us. Yeah. So you have Jesus or Joshua, and the name means God saves. And so you have God saves, God save us. Jesus Christ. Jesus the Christ, the anointed one, who's the one who is going to save us. So that is who they are welcoming in, is Jesus, which was a very common name at that time. It's kind of like the name John, or the name, I don't know, think of a name that's very, very common today. It wasn't an unusual name at that time, as I understand it. So as he comes in, and he is, as Matthew highlights, he is just walking into Zechariah chapter 9, and that prophecy that is done there for this son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, who will be the Messiah. All right, so getting into to verse 12 again, and we looked at this a little bit last week. Any other thoughts on the other thing? Him coming into Jerusalem, and do you remember what they put in front of him as he comes in on the colt? Their cloaks. Their cloaks, yeah, and palm leaves. So as he comes into the city, and another thing I want you to consider is this is a rabbi from Nazareth who doesn't teach normal teachings, teaches with authority, has both healed and exorcised demons, and brought people back from the dead, and fed people with very, very little food. And then he comes into Jerusalem, and they are saying, or at least Matthew is saying this. I think it's important that they didn't say this. Matthew is making this link in his gospel that this is happening to fulfill, go back to Zechariah chapter 9, that he's going to come in and save his people. So Matthew wants us to connect these dots of what this Jewish rabbi is going to do, this son of David. And then whenever they ask, verse 10, notice some of the people in this crowd ask the question, why would they ask, who is this? Why would they ask that? Would they not know? Just a question. Throw it out there. Why would they ask that? And so, what's that?
For confirmation.
Okay, for confirmation. Okay.
Not like they were newspapers.
That is true. That is true. I guess my question is, if you're in Jerusalem and Jesus had been there as well as the surrounding area, when you get to certain places where he's teaching, or he's in a smaller town and he's there teaching, or he's doing miracles, what tended to happen later on in his ministry? You get great crowds coming, and people are coming and flocking to both hear him and to have themselves or a family member or a friend healed by him. So they ask, the whole city's in a stir. Who is this that is coming into town? And maybe they did connect the dots between Zechariah 9 and what happened here.
City and people came for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
This didn't have no clue whatsoever.
Yeah, good point.
And may not have even been Jews, so
Yeah, very possible. Yeah, Carol.
Physically seeing.
Yeah.
Came in, even if you've heard of him and you didn't know,
Yeah.
who's this man coming in? And then they go, Jesus, and you're like, oh,
Right.
I've heard of him.
Yeah.
But
But
if they hadn't,
But you actually clarify for me why I'm asking that question, and thank you for y'all's comments. Why would Matthew include that? Why include the question that random people in the city are wondering who this is? Why would he say that? So pause that question. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to answer it.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I think it's introduced. He's asking the question so he can answer.
Right.
Using
I
the
agree.
crowd as kind of the
Yes. The impetus for it. Yeah.
asking the question so he can make it
Yeah.
clear who this was. But I will say that Jesus didn't spend very much time in Jerusalem.
No, he didn't.
In fact,
He didn't.
outside
Yep.
of Jerusalem, but only came to Jerusalem at the festival time. So,
Yep.
you got to imagine, people outside of Jerusalem probably saw him a lot more than those in Jerusalem.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And I do agree with that. I think it's interesting that it's not important that they were asking. Matthew's kind of using that as a what do planes take off of? As a runway for this answer. The crowd asks, "Who is this?" And so Matthew is then able to insert, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this wasn't an unusual occurrence either. A large
True.
crowd, people shouting
True.
Hosanna, people
True.
throwing down branches and their coats when somebody's
Yes.
coming to town.
Yes,
You know,
true.
It's probably an unusual thing to happen.
Yeah, true. It wasn't a daily thing that this happened. And remember, what did they shout? Not so much to him, but just generally about the situation. Hosanna, son of David. And what did David mean to this city and to this crowd generally?
It's their king.
Their king. And it is a long time ago that David was king. But how fresh was David in their minds? Very, very fresh. Yeah.
Matthew's more about showing fulfillment of prophecy.
Yes. Yes.
John, Luke, not quite as much.
Yeah. Well, and I would even add to that. I think it's like an 80-20 even. Obviously because of audience. It's for Matthew, it's almost as if anytime he can find, this is what happened there, and we find fulfillment of it here. I don't know that you find it hardly at all with Mark. And Luke's writing to Gentiles, so they don't really care. Mainly, yeah. Which explains a lot of the beginning of his letter also. Yeah.
Going back to the point about this probably was not a regular occurrence, you gotta remember too, that the fact that they were laying their cloaks on the ground, that was a coincidence.
Yes.
I mean, I think we overlook the fact that they didn't have lots of, it took months of a salary in order to get a cloak.
Yeah.
And so to throw that on the ground is high line.
Yes.
They didn't have 5 cloaks in the closet.
Yes.
They had one. Maybe
Yes.
they were wealthy.
Yes. Do you remember whenever Judas got upset with the woman that anointed Jesus? Why did he get upset?
Money.
Yeah. What she was giving, I in a little tiny way identify with that. One, because I'm like clinically frugal. I just hate spending money. And so sometimes, whenever we go through the mall, and every now and then we'll enter where all the cologne stuff is, and you can smell it. I'll go over there and go, I wonder how much. It's just, cologne's crazy. It's very expensive, and there's no way I'm buying that stuff. So whenever you consider, the value of things at that time, you can almost identify with Judas. All the assumptions that sometimes we make about him, it's like, we are living off of people helping, and here is this woman giving this stuff for him on his feet, and we could sell that, and we could use it for the ministry. Yeah, Ty.
Yes, but that whole thing of them being upset with him about that isn't the fact that he said that, it's because he was stealing from them.
Yeah, he was, right. So I again, to Doug's point, you have people here, and this is one of those things I think, again, without beating a dead horse, which I do a lot anyway, we know these stories so well that sometimes we tend to not notice that the crowds are taking their cloaks and they're putting it on the road. And then what is happening after that, like right after that? This animal is then walking on these cloaks that people are putting in front of Jesus. And then as that's happening, can you imagine this scene in Jerusalem as this guy, as they're going to say in verse 11, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. So he's not from Jerusalem, right? He doesn't have the connections that Paul or that Saul is going to have. What is going on? Sorry, my screen keeps timing out. So he's from Galilee. What's that?
That doesn't happen in paper.
It hasn't happened till today, Ty, so give me a break. I was waiting for that, by the way. Yeah, all you technology haters.
I didn't raise you this way.
This isn't your fault, right? So again, I don't know. There's times that I'm fascinated by the fact that their Savior, their Messiah, their smeared one, and not smeared in a bad way, but the anointed one, now they are celebrating And in fact, not only putting trees in their cloaks on the ground for him, cutting branches, they're not only saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, save us, Son of David, he who comes in the name of the Lord, and I think that's Kurios. Hosanna in the highest heaven. But then they claim, the crowds answered, this is Jesus, the Son of who? And when I ask that, it's not so much because you know who they are, but they were nobodies. They were literally nobodies from Nazareth in Galilee. Galilee's where fishermen were. There was no royalty there. There was no high education there. There was none of that stuff. And yet this is who they are highlighting is going to be their Messiah. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Save us. So what were they asking Jesus to do? Save us. Save us. And we could spend a lot of time on save us from who, but we know what that is. So then verse 12. Any other comments before we get to verse 12? Jesus entered the temple courts, drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those who selling. Now, I don't know if you've ever done like it's I'm going to use a word that's one of my favorite words. I don't use it very often, but we're going to kind of juxtaposition here. It's just a fun word to say. Where's Holden? He's my word guy. Just juxtaposition. So Jesus comes into Jerusalem and has this scene happen to him where he is on a donkey or a colt, depending upon when you look at it, that he got from a guy that whenever the disciples said, the master calls for this. And what does the guy say? Okay, it's yours. So Jesus gets on it. They are putting palm trees in front of him. They are putting their cloaks in front of him. They are making these statements. Hosanna, save us, Son of David. Save us, he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. This is Jesus. And he's from Nazareth in Galilee. What does Jesus do next? Your temple stinks. Your actions stink. Your attitudes are terrible. And I'm going to clear everything out of here. Have you ever thought about that? How Matthew narrates this, that we go from this rabbi from Nazareth in Galilee who's done all these things. His teachings are very different. And instead of him taking this mantle and running with it, he goes into the temple courts, drives out those who are buying and selling, overturns the table of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. And then what does he say? My house will be called a house of prayer. Whose house? Wow. Personal pronoun. Not God's house, not the temple. My house will be called a house of prayer, but you're making it a den of robbers, which they were. Yes, it is written. Right. Very true. And so as he goes in there and as he's doing this, he then calls on the Torah. The Torah says, this is what you're doing. And to that very point that Bob makes, I want you to notice that this rabbi from Nazareth, well, he was from Nazareth, from Galilee, and all of this stuff that happens with the donkey and the colt. And so he goes into the temple after having just been stated, save us, Son of David, walks into the temple, and then he calls on the Torah and says, you guys, the Torah says, it is written, you are making God's house, a house of prayer, a den of robbers. And so he just makes a mess of the temple in terms of the money changers and etc. Now, I know this has been said a couple of times, but I think it's important. I don't know what your perception of the temple was at this time, but it was a big complex. So in other words, this wasn't done near where, at least as I understand it, where worship was done. They had different compartments, if you will. You know, kind of like, well, it's not kind of like that at all, Andy. Never mind. If you go to different places that have different components within the, I actually thought of a mall because we were there yesterday, and you have different stores and different compartments within the mall. The temple was a big thing. You know, whenever Jesus said, tear this down and I'll rebuild it in 3 days, you remember what their answer was? It took 46 years to get this thing up. So it was kind of a big place. Yeah.
If you want the analogy of the mall, you could use an entrance to the mall as the
Okay.
where the money changers were.
Yeah. And even like our mall here, it's like, I want to go to this store. What's the quickest way to get there? Well, you don't go in through JCPenney. You go through Barnes & Noble or, whatever the case may be. But yes, exactly. Yeah.
There's something else here that I find interesting.
Yeah.
What is Jesus about to do? What's coming up very soon? Right? He's going to go to the cross. And
Right.
when he does, he enters the Holy of Holies. Right?
Yes.
Tears, and I kind of look at this as a preparatory step. He's going in and getting the temple ready for what he's about to do.
Yeah.
He's about to
Yeah.
open off the ultimate sacrifice.
Yes.
And be that lamb. And he can't do that with this bit of robbers, as he calls it. He has
Yes.
to clean it first.
Yes. Which, with that point, what is also, I think, interesting is who knows, well, I didn't say that right, not who knows, who is aware of what this possibly is speaking to, if I ask that the right way. Who knows what's happening here in this context, not here, but here. Who knows what's about to come? Only Jesus. So to Doug's point, what he is doing here, nobody else knows that he's about to be handed over and beaten and die. Now he's mentioned it to his disciples at least a half a dozen times, and the whole rising from the dead thing as well. But they're not thinking about that as we get closer to Jerusalem, he keeps reminding them, but they're not thinking, Lord, when's this going to happen? When are you going to die? Nobody's asking that, at least not that I can remember.
Because they just said, Hosanna.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his disciples. But yeah, they're, save us. You can't die. Which kind of puts an interesting highlight to, Matthew 16, whenever, Jesus, you are the Christ, Son of the living God, and upon this rock I'll build my church, and that whole scene. And then he says, oh, and by the way, have I mentioned, once we get closer to Jerusalem, they're going to arrest me, they're going to beat me, there's going to be this long trial, and then I'm going to what? I'm going to die on a cross. And what was the cross generally kept for? Criminals, hardened criminals. And I don't know if you've ever done any study or looking into that. They did it all the time. It wasn't like they did it 4 times a year. They did it a lot. So Jesus died as a common criminal. And then he tells them, I'm gonna raise on the 3rd day. So after he does this, verse 14, the blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. I don't know if you've ever done this before. For whatever reason, I think this way, that, because these aren't chronological, in other words, they're not in order as we understand it. None of the Gospels are. Matthew starts at point A, and he's going through a storyline. He's going through content as he wants us to see it. So it's almost as if, say you're telling a story to someone with your husband or your wife, and your story is probably going to be different than your spouse's. I would imagine every one of you that have told a story, you remember when this happened? And it's like, oh yeah. And so your wife tells it, your husband tells it. Maybe you have a sister that you went to the same place with, brother, whatever it is, a friend. And as you're telling the story, oh, you remember when this happened? It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So Matthew is narrating the story to get to his end, how he wants us to see this. And so after we find him going into the temple and doing this, which for whatever reason Matthew's version is very short. Verse 14, the blind and the lame came to him at the temple and he healed them. Yes?
At the same time, I kind of wonder
Yeah?
if it isn't more chronological than some of the others, only because Matthew started out with genealogy,
Yeah.
which is chronological.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just-
No, that's fair. It may be the more chronologically based one. Very possible. Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, that's why I keep some of my curiosities myself, because I don't know that it ultimately matters. But I guess the reason I find that discussion interesting is each gospel has a flow. They have a narrative that they want you to follow in terms of thought and ideas. And if we miss that, because once I found out that the Gospels weren't chronological, now just so we're clear, because every now and then I either teach or preach, and then someone says, you kept using this word, and I don't know what you were talking about. I know what the word means, but I don't know what you meant. So this isn't, none of the Gospels that we understand it, and when I say we, I mean the scholars, are this happened Tuesday, this happened Wednesday, this happened Thursday, this happened Friday, and on. It happens like generally in pockets. I mean, we don't get in Matthew 21 his birth. We're not saying that. But when you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all this stuff is in different places. They don't tell the stories the same way. So why is Matthew telling his story this way? Why is he doing that? Why is the Holy Spirit narrating it in this way? And there's a reason for that. And so we need to be following these thoughts to get to where they want us to be. So after the triumphal entry, after he goes into the temple and does what he does, then what does he do? He's healing people. He's in the temple after he caused this commotion, and he doesn't leave. He doesn't go over to Peter or Thomas or John and say, hey, we need to get out of here. I need to let this calm down because I just tore up the temple. What's he do? People come to him, apparently, after Son of David, Hosanna, save us. After this stuff that happened, of course, I'm just now going against the very thing that I said. In his narration, after that, he then starts healing the blind and the lame. People come to him for the healing. Apparently, they're not worried about the situation. They come to him to be healed. When the chief priests and teachers of the law, how many times have you guys had a hard time saying that when you're trying to say it fast? Those are chief priests and teachers of the law. Okay. Wanted you to identify with me there. Those are hard things to say fast. Saw the wonderful things he did, and the children shouting in the temple courts, Hosanna to the Son of David. They were what? They were indignant. They were mad. And whether they were jealous or they were just sincerely mad. So they asked him, do you hear what these children are saying? Jesus replied, have you never read, from the lips of children and infants, you, Kyrios, Master, Sir, Lord, have called forth your praise. And he left them and went out to the city, of the city to Bethany, where he spent the night.
Setting it up too. Jesus came and was recognized. He came into the temple and purged it of what they were doing wrong. And then Matthew setting up what God really Now, people are recognizing that that's what he's doing, and they're coming
Right.
to him.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose, and the children are recognizing it.
Right, yeah. Even the children are, yeah, Carol.
I think it's interesting that the scribes and the teachers of the law didn't get mad at him for tearing up the temple.
Yeah.
They're mad because of the homage people are paying to Jesus.
Yeah.
It shows where their minds are at.
Yeah. And without hitting this horse too much, which I know I am very capable of doing, Matthew doesn't identify that they're upset. For whatever reason, he goes from what happens directly into the healing. Now, I believe Luke and John do identify that, but Matthew does not. He doesn't touch how the leadership responds other than these children are shouting. They're not just whispering and talking to each other, they're shouting out, both with the entrance into the temple. It's very possible people are watching him healing and taking care of. And who is he healing? The blind and the lame. And what did they believe about ailments? Where did they come from? He was healing sinners. Whether it's them or their parents or their grandparents, and possibly it's like a lineage thing. So he's healing sinners. And where is he healing sinners? In the temple. After this incredible scene that he walks into, and so these children are even shouting, "Save us, Son of David." And they get upset about that. Do you hear what the children are saying? They asked him, and Jesus says, he did reply, "Yes, but have you not read from the lips of children and infants? You, O Lord, have called forth your praise." One of the things that I find so interesting about Jesus, at least as far as these Gospels present him, Jesus just never seems to be, on his heels. He never seems to be find any of this stuff problematic in terms of him personally. It's not like, again, he does the temple thing, and then he goes to his disciples and says, "We need to get out of here. We need to let everything calm down." He doesn't do that. In fact, he heals. They come to him, and they say indignantly, "You hear what people are saying about you." He's like, "Yeah, remember this prophecy that was said?" And then he goes off at that point, goes to Bethany, and he chills out there. So nothing that they do bothers him. Nothing that they do messes him up. Is that the second bill? Okay. All right. Thank you for your comments. We'll get started on verse 23, Matthew 21. And I want to remind you that we are going toward Matthew 24 in that whole chapter and what that's talking about, but I wanted to give us context of that. Thanks for your comment.